The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us today for Data Loggers Basics. I am your host, Taryn Picard, and we're going to get underway here in just a second. Alrighty, so our agenda for today, we will be taking an overview of our data loggers, the types of loggers, how they work, and what you need to know when selecting one. We'll also talk about some real-world applications, and then leave some time for questions at the end. So who are we? We are OnSIT Computer. We are the home of the Hobo data loggers. We are a world leader in data logging, and we were founded back in 1981. We currently have about 140 employees, but we are actually a global network of partners. We have distributors who help us all over the world, and we're mainly focused on data logging and monitoring. So what you need to know about this webinar today. The webinar itself will run for approximately 40 minutes. We will leave some time for Q&A at the end. And if you have any questions while the webinar is going on, please feel free to type them in the questions section of the control panel. We'll do our best to answer some of those, but I would like to let you know the webinar is being recorded and we will send out a link afterwards. If we don't get a chance to answer your question during the webinar, please be assured someone will follow up with you after the webinar to answer that question for you. So, with no further ado, I am very pleased to introduce you to my friend and colleague, Jack Parcheski. Jack is a senior product application specialist here at OnSIT. He has over 14 years of data logging experience, and he specializes in the building performance area. He also has an educational background in electrical engineering, so everyone, please welcome Jack.
Thanks, Taryn. Let's start this webinar off with a quick question. The first poll question we're going to ask is, are you currently using data loggers? And if you'll enter your responses, we'll take a quick tally.
So Jack, it looks like about 64% of our viewers today are currently using Hobo data loggers. There's 10% that are not currently using data loggers, and a small percent that have never used data loggers ever before.
All right, let's get started then. Right off the bat, what is a data logger? Well, a data logger is an electronic instrument that records data either over intervals or over a period of time. Typically, it's a compact device with a battery and a microprocessor, has some data storage, flash data storage, hopefully, and one or more sensors. They use loggers indoors, outdoors, and underwater, and they usually can record for up to years at a time unattended. Two types of data loggers. There's a state logger and an interval logger. State loggers check the state of the input every second. And the state logger only records a change in that state. So if the state stays at either 0 or 1, it will just remain that way until that state changes. State loggers also count pulses. So if you have an application where pulses need to be counted, a state logger would do that. Interval loggers, on the other hand, read the input at a selected interval. And it records that information at every interval. So if you set the logger for sampling every 15 seconds, the logger will go out, read what the input states, and store it. So it will use data at that rate. The values of that input can be any value anywhere from a percentage to a number or something like that. Further explanation of state and interval loggers. Again, the state logger only has two states, 0 and 1. They only change on either to a 0 or 1, and we only record information on that transition from a 1 to a 0 or 0 to a 1. Interval loggers, again, record every interval and record the data on that interval. So, and it can be any input. Typical logger would record over a range of 2.5 volts, from 0 to 2.5 volts. Common uses for data loggers, and these are only a few because data loggers can be used almost anywhere. You can use them for temperature and light, for field conditions, for CO2 measurements in a building, for temperature relative humidity outdoors, for remote field communications and weather information, for occupancy and light, for water levels, and they go on and on and on. Indoor measurements that we provide for environmental, they would be temperature, of course, relative humidity, CO2, air velocity, and volatile organic compounds, if you wanted to measure those. For measuring in the energy area, you have kilowatt hours, amp hours, power factor, AC and DC currents and voltages, differential pressures, pulse signals, 0 to 24 volt signals, then tilt and accelerations. Time of use logging would be light on and off, motor on and off, state changes, open and close, that kind of thing, light on, light off, and occupancy and light. Here's a typical sampling of some of our onsets indoor loggers. And the key thing to remember from this slide is indoor loggers can't get wet. They can't have dew form on them, can't have frost form on them. They can't be put in an environment where they could get wet, such as a greenhouse or a place that has condensing water. That's indoor loggers. Why use the data loggers? Well, for energy monitoring, there's a lot of uses. Building commissioners use them, performance contractors use them, in-house energy engineers use them, and they use them for monitoring lighting, just for measurement and verification, for energy audits, and they really need a common need is that it's a toolbox portability. In other words, you can bring it with you and set it up and leave it. Relatively low cost and fast deployment. A lot of times you need to be able to set that up rather quickly. Why use data loggers for an indoor environmental monitoring? Again, same type of users would use these on-site property managers, things like that. They're looking for indoor air quality, verifying that their building maintenance system is running correctly, storage monitoring, any one of these applications. And again, easy to deploy and easy way to get the data. And sometimes notifications if there's an issue with the building or an issue that the logger sees. Outdoor measurements, water temperature, water level, conductivity, salinity, soil moisture, water flow. We have weather measurements, temperature, relative humidity, wind speed and direction, rainfall, and even leaf wetness. Other applications outdoors would be the 4 to 20 milliamp signals for special sensors of other types, pulse signals, 0 to 24 volt input signals, again for interfacing to third-party sensors, and tilt and acceleration. Again, here's a view of a few of our different types of outdoor loggers, and these are weatherproof. You can put them out in the rain, they'll be fine, and some of them even go underwater. So that's the difference between indoor and outdoor loggers. Indoor loggers can't get wet, outdoor water loggers are weatherproof. All right. Why use data loggers for climate monitoring? Well, Research scientists uses them, climatologists use them, field biologists use them, and most of the time they're for agricultural research or animal science, even stormwater management is one of the uses. And again, they need to be durable in this case, and relatively low cost, and have research grade performance. Another water monitoring application, hydrologists use them, government agencies and environmental consultants. A lot of water studies are going on right now, either too much water or too little water, and trying to get a handle on what to do with it and where it accumulates. Again, research grade performance and easy to deploy. Second poll question, Karen. What is your primary application for data loggers? What are you going to be using them for? And we're gathering the information.
All right, Jack. So it looks like about 55% are monitoring for building performance. We have 30% using our loggers for water monitoring and 13% using them for climate monitoring.
All righty. Well, let's keep going here. What questions you ask when you're choosing a data logger? The first question we always ask is, what do you want to measure? What do you need to measure and for how long? And also want to know if it's a one-time situation, or are you going to be using them over and over again, or do you just want to have them in a toolkit with you? And then how often do you need to access that data, and how quickly, and how would you like to access that data? We have a number of different options for getting the data to you from the loggers. Important considerations when you're buying a logger. You want to know about the measurement accuracy, data access options, software capabilities, battery life, the total cost of ownership, and product support. We'll address each one of these. First one was measurement accuracy. A lot of times you buy a logger and the accuracy is much higher than you need. So you want to be careful about that. You want to make sure that the accuracy is over the entire range that you're looking at, and also higher resolution doesn't necessarily mean it's a better measurement. And a lot of times you don't want to pay for that extra resolution. Data access options, and we'll go over what kind of options you have to gather the data and set up these loggers. First ones we'll look at is the USB loggers. And these USB loggers use a cable or shuttle. And the first thing you do is configure and launch them either with the cable or the shuttle or the base station. You actually take and connect the cable to the logger, or put the logger into the base station and set it up for launch. You launch it. The second step is to secure the loggers in place wherever they're going, either underwater or on a wall or what have you. Connect up all the sensors to it. After you've taken your data, then you download it, which is a reverse of the configure and launch. Download the data, connect it up, plug it in, download the data to your PC, either with a cable or with the base station. And then fourth, of course, is process and analyze the data. All of this is done with our HoboWare software to accomplish this. Second type of loggers you have to access data is the Bluetooth loggers. And Bluetooth loggers basically run from an iPhone, an iPad, or an Android device. There is an app called Hobo Mobile, And HoboMobile does what just the cable and the software in the last slide showed you. It connects to the logger. It allows you to make the settings and to launch the logger. And then you do the reverse, of course, when you're done. You download the data from the logger. The application will automatically show you a graph of what happened with the data. And you can export that, either email it to someone or to print it or save it, whatever you choose to do. And that's with the HoboMobile app on your iPhone, iPad, or Android device. Third option is wireless sensors. We have a family of sensors called the ZW series. They're short range centralized data location. The ZW series has a receiver connected to a PC that's running 24/7, and the data from the nodes gets transmitted wirelessly back to the receiver and stored on the PC. Here's a little diagram of how that works out. The receiver and the PC are connected at one location, and then the nodes wirelessly transmit the data back to the receiver, and it's stored on that PC's hard drive. And this is all accomplished with the HoboNode Manager, part of HoboWare, but a separate application called HoboNode Manager for the ZW series wireless node sensors. Last but not least are the web-based systems. These are long-range wireless access. These are for remote locations where you might not be able to get back to, or you need to leave in a rather difficult place to get to. It uses the internet to upload the data to our server, and our server access, our server application, which is called HoboLink. And the stations actually upload that data on a regular basis. And then you with a browser can look at that data from anywhere in the world. So as long as you have a browser and access to the internet, you can look up the data that's on our server. And all of this works with HoboLink, the server application for the wireless loggers. HoboWare software, I did get some questions earlier about, and before the webinar began, about what is actually set up and displayed on our HoboWare software. One of the things, and it's a little difficult to see on this, I'll try to make a better slide for the next presentation, but all of this data here is time and date stamped for temperature and relative humidity, and each reading for that time and date stamp. So if you had logged every 15 minutes, this would be every temperature and relative humidity for every 15 minutes that it took data. And also automatically, both of these show up, the tabulated data and also the diagram, the chart here. So you can actually see visually, get a presentation of what the data did when you first open up HoboWare to look at it. So these two pieces are automatically generated for you, so you don't have to do any kind of special configuration. We try to make the software fairly intuitive and allow you to get to the data and export it if you want to an Excel spreadsheet, if you want to do analysis or something like that. Again, this is a function of the HoboWare software. HoboMobile capabilities, we spoke a little bit about this before. Here is a connect screen for the HoboMobile application. These are all of our MX series loggers. You can configure, read out, get the status. You can even page some of the loggers that have that paging capabilities. It will automatically generate you a graph and show you what happened with the data that you collected. And you can actually output the data in Excel formats or CSV or text or even the HoboWare format. So if you wanted to look at the data in HoboWare, you could output the data and you email that data from your phone to wherever you'd like to look at the data, and that's how you share it. This again is the HoboMobile application. Battery life. Battery life on loggers, you want to get the most out of your logger you can, at least 6 to 12 months if you're going to use it. Some of our newer loggers actually run 2 years, up to 2 years on a single battery, which is amazing. Also, standard batteries, if you can get them, that's the easiest ones. If you need to replace the battery, you want to try to get one that's somewhat common. Total cost of ownership is another consideration. Will the logger need to be calibrated? Will you need to invest in expensive software? Are you able to use the regular batteries? Are the cables included with the logger? And do I need to purchase some kind of plan to access the data from my loggers? Lastly is product support. Should have a range of services and be a long-term solutions provider. Also available for you should be application notes and other resources that you can use to understand the logger and understand your application and use them to the best of your ability. Let's take a look now at some monitoring applications. These are an indoor application. This is an example of something we've helped customers do in the past. The challenge was there was water damage on a 5th floor residence in an apartment complex in San Francisco, and they wanted to check to make sure that they first of all fixed the leak and that the apartment was drying out and properly, and mold wouldn't be a factor after it dried out. Solution was we put in some MX 1101 temperature and relative humidity loggers. They would take readings every 10 minutes, and they did that over a 2-month period. And they could monitor that moisture trend, how wet was the wall, and whether or not there would be some danger of mold. The results was they were able to use the low-cost loggers. The MX series again is a Bluetooth-based series, so they didn't have to go in and disrupt the tenants. They could log the information from outside the tenants' apartments and averted a mold problem that they were worried about. Tracking energy use, another application we had. The challenge was for a printing facility, and they wanted to lower their peak demands so they could save some money from the energy costs, and they needed remote access to the data. For this solution, we suggested the RS3000. They were able to put in the system and monitor the electric usage, and they were able to look at that using HoboLink in a near real-time display. They collected data every 2 minutes and received alarms when the range of that data went out of spec. Turned out it did save them a lot of money. It was really convenient for the energy managing people to watch the data and to respond to make sure that they stopped using excessive data during peak hours. And it turned out to be a 2-year payback on the system. Water monitoring applications. There was a creek in Oregon that the temperature of the creek was increasing, and they wanted to try to decrease it so that it would stop affecting the native fish in that creek. Solution was to deploy the U22001 data loggers, and they monitored not only the stream but in some additional areas to see if they couldn't find an area where there was cooler water and help modify the temperature rise. Turned out they did characterize the stream flow and were able to add some of the springs water to the creek and decrease the temperature, and that helped out both the fish and the environment. It's an environmental monitoring application. This was used or was requested from to monitor temperatures on a farm. And they wanted the temperature and relative humidity at every location on the farm, so they could analyze that and find out what crops would be best for what particular part of the farm. So we installed Bluetooth data loggers in rows where the operator could drive a tractor by and collect the data. And they collected this data during the growing season. The results were they could map the entire farm area and get the temperature and relative humidity across the whole fields, and then set up to align the best plants for the best section of the farm area. We have some resources that I want to talk about a little bit. There's self-paced training online. There are detailed training courses on Hobo's products and software. I'll actually take you over there and show you this as we finish. This is at www.onsencomp.resources.training. There's a knowledge base. You can actually search both our product support and forum posts for information about the product or our operations. Excuse me. And last but not least is the user forum. This is an online meeting space for data logger users and people, an area where you can exchange information and propose your ideas and have other data logger users respond. Questions. We had a number of questions come in about before the presentation started and when you signed up for it, and I'm going to address a few of these that were particular to this course, the Data Logger Basics. How chart temperatures and other methods of summarize are presented in data. I think we went over that. I talked a little bit about the fact that the tabulated data shows up on every logger we sell along with a chart of data that's displayed automatically. So you don't have to think about how to generate a chart or look at the raw data. It's right there when you finish downloading the data from what the particular logger you're on. Here's a question that often for not only the U20L water level loggers, but all of our loggers. Do they need to be turned off when not in use? And if so, how is that done? When you stop a logger, which is you need to stop the logger from taking data, once that logger is stopped, it's in a sleep mode. It does not need to be shut off. It doesn't shut off, but it is in sleep mode, and that uses minimal amount of battery power and will not use any more memory from the logger. Go over some of the features behind plotting data, statistics, and saving images of graphs from HoboWare Pro. Again, I'm going to just quickly take you out to the website for a minute. Here's, and let's go back to here and we'll find it again. From here, from the HoboWare website, if you go to resources, and from resources, there's a number of different items you can choose from, white papers and application stories and whatever. Over here on the right-hand side is self-guided training. We can't address a lot of the issues with HoboWare and what the software does, but if you take the self-guided training, the first thing that shows up here is working with HoboWare and HoboWare Pro, the basics. This will teach you all you need to know about basic operation of the HoboWare. And if that's not adequate, you can take the advanced course with the advanced topics on it. Between these two, you should be able to use HoboWare like a pro after you've run through these trainings. So I strongly recommend you take a look at those if you have HoboWare questions and you need some answers. That's a great resource. Let's go. All right, back to the questions. How best to protect loggers from humidity and water ingress? Well, that's easily solved. How to best protect the loggers? You use outdoor loggers. Indoor loggers are susceptible to humidity and water ingress. Outdoor loggers, not at all. So that's the solution for that. What are the top 3 things to consider when choosing a surface water level logger? First of all, you need to know what the range is. How much of a variation will the water level change or anticipated change? 100 feet, 30 feet, 14 feet? Excuse me. Second of all is, are we deploying this in fresh water or are we deploying it in salt water? So definitely something you need to know ahead of time. And how do you want to collect the data? Would you want remote access? Or do you want to manually collect the data once a month, and how often, obviously? How to precision of the data loggers compared to costly ones. Our precision, Onset's data loggers are research grade loggers. So our precision accuracy are of the highest quality. You can pay more for loggers, but if you compare the specs on them, you'll be pretty pleasantly surprised that the Hobo loggers definitely for the price are the best value. What is the range, space, and square footage that an individual data logger can monitor? And can you speak about calibration? First, the rule of thumb for data loggers and measuring temperature and relative humidity in a room is 2,500 square feet. And Onset's data loggers do not need calibration. They operate directly within spec when you buy them from us, right out of the box. Basic data logger functions, basic monitor site criteria, power requirements. Basic functions obviously are temperature and relative humidity. The selection criteria, you don't want to put a logger in a place where the wind or vents blow on it or can be affected by either direct sunlight or some other kind of variation in the room or outdoors. And power requirements, as far as our loggers are concerned, they're all battery powered, so there's no power requirements needed or concerns in deploying our loggers. The basic of launching loggers and downloading data and using the software, we did address that in the presentation. That's using the USB cable or the base station and connecting it up and with the PC and using HoboWare. So that's relatively straightforward. Will you possibly offer higher amperages metering in the future to monitor entire panel boards? I put this in even though it's outside the range of basic data logger basics, and we will be offering that in the future. Stay tuned. I can't speak about it right now, but it's an opportunity, and it's some new exciting products coming out that will address those ranges. Can data loggers handle being left in water bodies that freeze over? We would like to monitor some pools in Vermont. It can survive in bodies of water that freeze over. It can't survive being in the ice if those ponds or pools freeze. So nothing can withstand being frozen in the ice, or not normally. But if the water is not frozen underneath the surface, that's where the logger should be, and it certainly can take those very, very cold waters, as long as it's not crushed by the ice forming. Capability of data loggers for monitoring temperature level, temperature, special conductivity of brackish and shallow wet on water environments. We have a couple of different loggers that'll do that. We have the water level loggers, and they include a temperature sensor. So you get water level and temperature. And we also have another logger that would do conductivity, and that also conductivity logger also monitors temperature, so you'd get both. With that, Tia, I guess, do we have any more questions that we can answer from that were sent in?
Yes, thank you, Jack. So we're getting a lot of questions that are fairly specific to individual applications. Again, I will make sure that someone follows up with you after the webinar if we don't answer your question now. One of the questions that was more general that came through is more specific to the differences between HoboMobile and HoboWare. If you could kind of give us an overview, Jack, of what the difference is between those two softwares, what are the advantages and disadvantages of using one over the other, that would be great.
Well, the HoboWare, of course, and HoboWare Pro software has been our standard for as long as the company's been running. The HoboWare app is a variation of that. We try to put everything that we have from HoboWare into the app, but it is an abbreviated version of HoboWare. The two works similarly. They allow you to set up the data, set up the logger, set parameters, and launch the logger, download it. Again, HoboWare would be used with a PC and with a cable or some kind of connection to the logger, whereas the HoboMobile app uses only Bluetooth and connects wirelessly to the newer loggers. And allows you to download that data without connection. Yeah, it also allows you HoboMobile. The HoboMobile application also allows you. There's a setting in the software. You can actually take the data that you collect on your iPhone, iPad, or Android device and have it uploaded to our cloud, to our HoboLink application. That would provide you storage for that information, those data logged files, on our server, and that can be done when the phone gets back into an area where there's Wi-Fi available. That's some of the differences in the two products. Another question, T?
Yes, so Jack, we have another question here specifically asking about using which particular data loggers you'd recommend with a VOC sensor. But what I think would be important to address here is just how easy it is to adapt a wide variety of our loggers with third-party sensors.
Mm-hmm. The VOC sensor, along with a lot of other sensors, is a simple input to any of our loggers. One of the most common loggers that are used with the VOC would be the UX120-006M. That's the 4-channel analog input logger. Any of our loggers that have analog inputs can be interfaced to that sensor. Also, the CW series allows you to interface to those sensors very simply with a cable. Almost any third-party sensor, if it has a 4 to 20 milliamp output or a 0 to 24 volt DC output or a pulse output, any of those loggers can be, any of those sensors can be interfaced to our loggers relatively easy. And again, the workhorse of all of that is the UX120-006M.
Thank you, Jack. So we have another question about protective caps being used on the U-22s, but really all of our underwater data loggers that have the communication devices to be used with them. So as far as protecting those windows or housing the loggers properly, will that really affect how you're getting your readings if they're not housed properly, if those windows get scratched? What do you recommend?
I always recommend that if the logger is going to be in an environment where there can be either silt or some kind of abrasive material around the infrared sensor port, that it have a cap. The caps basically protect that port. You can actually scratch that cap, and if it's scratched sufficiently enough, the infrared signals are deflected and won't won't communicate back to your base station or your shuttle. So anytime you deploy a logger that would be in an environment that it could come in contact with some kind of abrasion on that window, you should use the caps. T?
Thank you, Jack. So question about our tidbit data loggers, but this really can cover a lot of our different loggers. What are the dangers of overwriting a data file, say you're logging over a 1-year period of time?
The HoboWare software is built in, has a built-in feature that always prompts you ahead of time before you relaunch a logger if the data hasn't been read out. So when you connect to a logger, you'll always get the question of, do you want to read this logger out? And even if you avoid that question, when you go to restart the logger or launch the logger, you'll get another question that said, are you sure you want to launch this logger? The data hasn't been read out. It needs to be read out. So we try our very best not to allow you to write over data that you need or you wanted to save. But anytime you relaunch the logger, it again starts over and will write over what you have. But we try to make you collect that data ahead of time or store that information before you relaunch it. So just a safety feature.
Thank you, Jack. So going back in general here, you talked a little bit about how the two different types of data loggers, as far as a state logger versus an interval logger works. We do have a question here, is your data gathered on average over the time period when data is collected, or is it a snapshot in time?
It is a snapshot in time. In other words, that logging interval says every 15 minutes go and take that information, and that's just a snapshot information for that. There is a feature on some of our loggers that would allow you to do that averaging. It's not available on all the loggers, but there is a feature that would allow you to take an average. In other words, the sampling rate would be faster than the logging interval, and it would sample that data and then average that data reading for that logging interval. So that's a good question.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jack. It looks like we've covered most of our general questions. Again, I will make sure someone follows up with anyone who had a specific question. We will get back to you today with an answer to those questions.
And I've just put up the contact information slide. If you have questions about this webinar, certainly get a hold of me. If you have sales questions, we have a sales rep, Sean Kelly, who you can contact for information on sales. If you need technical support on operating your logger or having trouble operating your tool and you need some help, certainly contact our technical support people. They're here from 8 in the morning till 8 at night. And again, if you just need a product application specialist, you need to buy a logger, or you have an application, not sure of how you want to use the loggers, give us a call and we can help out with that. All right, that's it, folks. Thank you so much for attending, and hopefully we'll see you later. Bye-bye.